Well. I was supposed to do a Destiny video today, hence the Destiny props, but I saw a thread on RPGHorrorStories that caught my interest. I'm gonna be honest, I don't browse RPGHorrorStories as much since you guys give me plenty of horror stories yourselves through my inbox. However, I still like to comment and contribute to the community because I think it's a pretty neat community. But said community recently encountered quite the fascinating individual. So somebody posted on the subreddit with a horror story about a dungeon master who forced a very explicit assault encounter that was not good. Essentially, the writer and their partner were having explicit romantic roleplay. The DM told them to cut it out. They did so, and the rest of the romantic roleplay ended up being fade to black. Later on, when the writer was absent from the session, the DM railroaded their character into having said explicit assault scene. And yeah, awful. That is horrible. The DM should never do that. No DM should do that to any player character at a D&D table. That is absolutely terrible behavior. Though, there was an interesting question that arose from this thread. Many people noticed the inciting incident was the writer and their partner having an explicit roleplay scene at the table. And a lot of people asked, were the rest of the players okay with that? It's a reasonable question. Not everybody wants to watch ERP at a Dungeons & Dragons game, though there are definitely tables where that kind of content would be okay. So people asked that question, and the writer responded with grace and dignity.
Soon, this sub will basically be saying, if your character hold hands, then you are... Lots of campaigns have sex scenes, and there's nothing wrong with that. If yours doesn't, that's fine. But don't go finger-wagging with those that do, like some Puritan. Stop with the woke narrative, some poor oppressed victim sitting in silence being subjected to sex. This party is and has always been probably the type of person who thinks, I can't kiss this girl until I have a written contract stating her consent. Like this prove my point about woke sexual purity.
Grace. Dignity. So, yeah, clearly there is a disconnect here. A full-on meltdown resulted from these simple questions, and it was definitely not flattering to the writer. So, what can we learn from this? Why am I doing this on this series? Well, because I wanted to do it on RPGHorrorStories, but the analysis portion ended up being so long, I decided to just do a dedicated video, because I think this does bring up interesting lessons. Lessons about Session 0, lessons about explicit content at your Dungeons & Dragons table, and lessons about communication, or the lack thereof. Without further ado, guys, let's get started. Okay, so what's the problem, in case you can't see it already? A lot of users on the forums pointed out that, hey, your players, your fellow players at the table might not be entirely happy with watching you and your partner roleplay an erotic scene like this. Did you get their consent? And the answer was, yes, question mark? The consent is up in the air. The writer said that they discussed having 18 plus content at the table, but didn't explicitly say, we are going to bone at this D&D game. And that is a problem. The issue is specificity. One of my biggest pet peeves when it comes to talking about Dungeons & Dragons and talking about Session 0 and talking about explicit content is that so many people just say, oh, this game is 18 plus and call it a day. What does that mean? What does it mean when your game is 18 plus? Does your game just have adult language? Is there adult themes like discrimination or politics that younger people would probably not be interested in? What kind of content constitutes 18 plus? That's such a wide margin. Like, take that new Scott Pilgrim anime, for example. I mean, that is a pretty explicitly 18 plus show. It's marketed towards a more mature audience, but that show doesn't even have mature language. It explicitly censors every curse word. 18 plus means different things to different people. Now, there is a caveat here. When you're talking about a TTRPG, you can't be completely clear about every single thing that's going to happen at the D&D table, every single piece of content that might make someone uncomfortable, because first and foremost, it's not just mature content that can make someone uncomfortable. It could be something completely mundane and out of nowhere that you couldn't possibly predict. And also, you don't know what's going to happen at your D&D table. I mean, situations happen spontaneously all the time. So how do you nip this in the bud? You can't cover everything in the world that's going to happen at your game, so how do you fix this? Well, the solution is to not just say what's probably going to be at the table, but what isn't at the table. Ask the players what they don't want. Ask them what they're uncomfortable with. To lead them into this, I usually tell my players what I'm not comfortable with. Not just the clear stuff, like I'm not comfortable with explicit assault, but I'm also not comfortable with, for example, describing someone getting wet. Not like that. Don't be weird. I mean water. I don't like it when people describe like water dripping off of skin or out of hair or clothes especially. It just, I don't know, it gives me the tinglies even just describing it here. It's weird. I don't know why I'm like this. I just know I am. And I tell people that. It's a pretty silly thing to be uncomfortable around. I mean, I know I'm self-aware, but it is something that I deal with nonetheless. And when I tell people that, it makes them more comfortable telling me what they're uncomfortable with. Doing this simple little thing, doesn't even need to be like an open discussion. It could just be something you do in DMs, can help you a ton. Maybe it's a parent who doesn't want to hear about a child getting cut in half. Maybe it's somebody who has a fear of spiders. It can just be small things, but these things are important. Now, I know what you're saying. What if the content that they don't want is super integral to my campaign, like we're playing a drow campaign and they don't like spiders? Well, you can tell them that they need to find a different game. I don't know why this is such a difficult concept for so many people to get. Not everyone needs to play at every D&D table. It isn't a mark of failure if somebody doesn't want to play at your game. There are so many people out there who play Dungeons & Dragons, who play TTRPGs. You are bound to find players who are comfortable with the content at your table. If somebody is an arachnophobe who wants to get into a drow campaign, well, I'm sorry. I tell them that, look, spiders are a big part of this game. I think you'd be better off finding another game that better suits your needs. That's it. It's as simple as that. However, doesn't this kind of counteract what I said at the beginning with the OP needing to get into specifics? I just said how you can't always get into every single specific thing. Well, I will say this. When it comes to content at your table, you do need to have a degree of self-awareness. For example, if you are going to go in-depth, explicitly describing erotic scenes between two player characters, that might be something that you want to explicitly tell people. Yeah, there are times where somebody's limits are going to be vague or opaque or unpredictable, but there are other times where those limits are shared by a lot of people out there. One of those common limits being, a lot of people don't want to just watch two other people have an erotic roleplay scene. That's not something that a lot of people are into. So if you want to do that, you need to ask. Content like that, content specifically like that, should be discussed no matter what. It's not enough to just ask people, hey, what kind of things are you uncomfortable with? You also need to tell people, hey, these are the kind of things that are going to be in the campaign, especially if it's something that you specifically want. Like the OP went into this game wanting to do these scenes with their partner. If you want to do that, you gotta ask. Another big issue here is the group. The group at large. We kind of brought them up at the end here, but when I was reading this whole story and getting into the narrative nitty-gritty, I couldn't help but notice that the group is not really accounted for. According to the OP, they had an explicit scene with their girlfriend, the DM had a meltdown over it, the DM escalated things into unacceptable territory, the OP heroically threw all of their dice at the horrible dungeon master and then stormed off and left. Where's the group during all of this? During the beginning of the story, the writers said that they prioritize player agency over everything else. That's what's most important outside of extreme situations like mind flayer, mind control. But what's fascinating to me is that when we're talking about this explicit scene that the writer did with their partner, don't you think the agency of the rest of the players was kind of taken away regardless? It was kind of like agency for me and not for thee. I mean, what were the other players even doing in that moment? Were they just like sitting there, just watching? I mean, that must have been weird, right? I have done scenes where there are two people talking and me and the rest of the players are sitting there watching, but I think specifically here, it would get a bit weird watching two people have pretend sex at a Dungeons & Dragons game. I mean, I think that would make me uncomfortable. Is it making you uncomfortable right now? Because I'm making you listen to it right now, right here. Do you like it? Probably not. Or maybe you do, who knows? The point that I'm trying to get at is the group is not being prioritized. It's two players doing their thing and everybody else just kind of needs to watch as they claim their agency while everyone else is just kind of swept to the sidelines. And maybe they're okay with that. I mentioned it during the little bit I just did, but there are definitely times where a certain amount of players are going to have a roleplay scene and the rest of the people are just going to be watching. I mean, that sometimes happens. It happens at my D&D table. But here, number one, this is a tad different than just roleplay between two characters having a fun conversation during the night's watch. But one big pushback that I see all the time with Session Zero or communication in general is, what about player agency? Player agency needs to be prioritized. And I really hate that. I'm not gonna lie. Player agency is really important. It's important that players get to play the game and have agency over their characters. But is player agency more important than making sure people are having fun in the first place? Like, if your player agency makes the game less fun for everyone else, if your player agency forces people to just watch you and your partner boning, is that really helpful for the game at large? Or is it just helpful for you? Like I said earlier, player agency for me and not for thee. Player agency, or hell, a DM's world building are the two most common things I see, and I feel like these are becoming the new, it's what my character would do. They're the new excuses to act crappy at the table without any consequences, the new excuses to ignore what other people want with your game. Of course, there is the possibility of, the players actually did love this stuff. Maybe the players absolutely loved watching the OP and their partner pretend to have sex at the D&D table. Who knows? Maybe they absolutely enjoyed putting on hold their quest to slay dragons or kill liches so that they can watch two people ERP right in front of them. I mean, maybe. Given the OP's a bit of extreme reaction to people asking the simple question of other player consent, I think it's unlikely, but it is possible. Look, the reason I'm talking about all of this isn't just to make fun of somebody's dorky Reddit meltdown. The other reason is because I'm seeing this more and more. I'm seeing more and more people pushing back against basic communication, just talking to others. But I don't really know what to tell you, man. You're playing a game with other people. You're playing a game where the whole thing is you talking to other people. That's the whole part of gameplay. I mean, other than rolling dice and moving tokens, the whole gameplay of a TTRPG is talking. So I'm sorry, but you're gonna need to be good at it eventually. You're gonna need to learn how to talk to people, how to make sure that the content at your game is chill with everybody. Look, it doesn't mean completely erasing player agency. That's not what I'm trying to say. Some people really break their legs taking that leap of logic. But at the same time, it's not draconian. Player agency doesn't completely cancel out communication the same way communication doesn't completely cancel out player agency. You need both. You need to talk to each other, and you need to have fun at the same time. It's not hard to do both. So yeah, there you go. We've been doing a lot of horror story type content on this series, hoping to make it a bit more positive going into December. We'll be doing like product reviews and Christmas lists. By the way, are you still interested in that Destiny video? Because it was going to be about some of the worst world building ever seen in fantasy. Kind of similar to my last video game videos, because usually I really love Destiny, but there's one aspect of the world that I'm not a big fan of, and I wanted to talk about in a D&D context, but my video game videos have like a 50-50 chance of being really good, or really not landing with you guys, so I kind of want to get your opinion before I do it. Anyway, with that being said, if you guys enjoy this bit of an unorthodox crossover between horror stories and tavern tips, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of our content, then you can check out our proper RPG Horror Story series. We just changed the format up to make it way more aesthetically pleasing. It's linked in the cards, and while you're there, subscribe to Crispy's Tavern to get more of our content as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own tips or thoughts, go down in the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment Meltdown to let me know you made it to the end of the video. In essence, like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.